Well, British Conservatives have rebuked the report, calling Alston's findings political. So let's ask him about it. UN Special Rapporteur Philip Alston joins me from New York. Great pleasure having you on the program. Sir, I'm going to ask you about the accusations and what Amber Rudd had to say in a moment. But let me first ask you to qualify what you said in the report in a nutshell. You've said this is imposed misery, and you've also used the phrase social re-engineering. Tell me what you mean by that and how you qualify it.
The report makes the point that normally when we talk about the really dramatic cuts in welfare and other services in the United Kingdom, it's done under the heading of austerity. Austerity suggests that there's no choice, that it's in order to bring about fiscal consolidation. My argument is that, in fact, these cuts had very little to do with the need for fiscal consolidation, but rather were a program to to radically change the nature of the welfare state in the United Kingdom. I think if the government set out to do that, it should be proud of itself, because it has really transformed it into a system that is very different from the one that existed before.
Is this a deliberate attempt by the government to impoverish their own society?
I think the philosophy of the government is that the only thing that really matters is employment. Anyone who's poor should get out and work, and anyone who still needs to rely on government assistance is going to be given as hard a time as possible. Life is not going to be at all pleasant for them, and that will encourage them to get out and work and reduce their reliance on government. So rather than saying that in any society there's always a small number of people who need some sort of assistance from government, that essentially is not being provided at levels that make it possible for people to survive in dignity.
So the Work and Pensions Secretary Amber Rudd says your report is political. First, help me understand what you think she means by that.
Well, I'm sure that she and I would agree. I think that these are questions of politics. I've said that the approach being adopted by the UK government is a political choice. The problem is that I'm coming at it from a human rights perspective, and once you get below a certain level where the right to dignity, right to live in, right to an adequate standard of living and so on are jeopardized, it moves from the political to a point where the obligations that the country has taken on and the values that the government stands for are not being supported.
So as we watch her say that, perhaps I can sort of impose what some of us would be thinking. She's not happy. She says, yes, you make some good points about universal credit and so on, but your language was political, with the inference being that perhaps this guy doesn't like the Tories, perhaps he's a lefty, maybe he's a Labour supporter, maybe he wants Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister. Is that what it is?
I think that would be nonsensical. I didn't meet with Jeremy Corbyn. I have had nothing to do with him. I'm not supporting one party or the other. I've said very clearly that I think if the Conservatives wanted to improve the system on their own terms, they could do it very easily. And I think Amber Rudd is potentially a very good new minister. She's got a strong track record of standing up for women. That's one of the things that really needs to be done in the Work and Pensions ministry. And I think she could change the system without changing the ideology and make really major improvements.
Yeah, so as your report stated, and it's quite shocking, 14 million people living in poverty in the fifth largest economy in the world. Brexit is happening, and there's a lot of uncertainty with regards Brexit. Is this going to make it worse? Is that the trajectory?
Everyone that I've spoken to and all the studies that I've read indicate that Brexit is going to cost a reasonable amount, or maybe even a lot, in terms of GDP. That's not contested. I think basically the British people have made that choice. They're prepared to trade off some degree of economic well-being for greater sovereignty as they see it. But there is no question that government revenues will fall, that there will be less money available in the public purse. And on present trajectories, it's likely that those who are at the lower end in society are the ones who are really going to suffer the most. And unless there's a program in place to cushion that, I think they will be the big losers from Brexit. And of course, the irony is that many observers think that it was precisely because of economic insecurity, because of discontent with globalization, which was blamed on the European Union, that's why a lot of low-income people voted for Brexit. But they will get the double whammy. They're the ones who are really going to suffer the most from Brexit.
And a lot of them were convinced to blame foreigners for their economic woes. There's a bit of buyer's remorse at the moment. Some people are saying that that might not exactly be true. Now, I know that the UK wasn't the first place that you visited and assessed in your capacity as the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights. How did the UK compare to other countries that you visited?
Well, it's very hard to do a comparison. I've visited China, Saudi Arabia, Mauritania, Ghana. I think maybe the most relevant comparison is the United States. In some ways, the United Kingdom is in a much better position than the US because it still has a national health service. That makes a huge difference. It also still has the outlines of a welfare state. But on the other hand, the UK has introduced punitive measures against those who infringe the system in even very minor ways that American conservatives could barely even dream of. You can be sanctioned for years in the United Kingdom for things like not turning up for meetings, for providing wrong information on a form and so on. And that's really quite shocking.
Right. And I know that you made the comparison with the US, and you said that the UK government is in denial of the problem. I wonder if the reactions were similar, where with both countries, you come out with your report, you say there's poverty and there's a problem here. Did you get the same thing? Did you get this idea that, listen, we're not Mauritania, we're not a third world country, we're the United States, we're the United Kingdom. You don't get to say this to us.
Yes, I think that's a fairly consistent response. It's not one that troubles me unduly. Certainly, Ambassador Nikki Haley said that I should be looking at Burundi and the Democratic Republic of the Congo because that's where she felt real poverty existed. And as I said, she obviously thinks that 40 million Americans living in poverty by the standards of the US Census Bureau is not a problem. So it's true that many people in developed countries have this sort of smug assumption that, well, we don't have poverty. That is in developing countries, not here. But of course, it's not. Governments are expected to respond in this way to the sort of reports that I do. They're going to dismiss them, but that's not the end of the story. In the United States, there's been a huge amount of ongoing discussion about the report that I wrote. And I think in the United Kingdom, this will continue to be an issue in Parliament and elsewhere. It won't be something that the government can just wipe away with a few comments saying it's political.
Right. Yeah, this is fascinating. As far as I understand, this will go to the UN Human Rights Council next year in Geneva. Looking forward to hearing and seeing how that unfolds. Philip Alston, it's been a pleasure having you on the Newsmakers. Please come back to the show anytime.